Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. It is time today to talk about all the books that I read in the month of August. Typically, I try to do a mid-month wrap-up, but that just did not work out with my schedule this past month. So I do have all of the books that I read in the month of August here to talk about, and that is 12 books. I'm going to try not to take too long to talk about each of them, but I had a fantastic reading month in the month of August. So let's just jump right in. The first book that I finished right at the beginning of the month is How Not to Die Alone by Richard Roeper. This one takes place in England. It's the story of Andrew. Andrew works a public health job cleaning out the houses and arranging for the funerals of people who pass away but don't have anybody, don't have family members. They live on their own, and it's kind of a thankless and sometimes disgusting job. Some of these people who pass away, nobody realizes it for a little while, and so it's smelly and gross, and Andrew himself is a bit of a loner. Well, one day a new woman begins working in the office with him, and they seem to click and get along really well, and he starts to develop feelings for her. I enjoyed this story, but the thing that I had a problem with is that this woman, Peggy, who he becomes friends with, I liked their friendship. I liked that he was no longer feeling so lonely, that he was connecting with someone, but Peggy is married. And yes, her marriage has some problems and some issues, but their friendship gradually becomes more, and I did not like that aspect of things. So I gave this one 3 stars. I'm happy that I read it. It is, however, going on my unhaul pile because I didn't love it, and I don't think that I would ever read it again. The next book that I read, if you saw my Instagram post of my wrap-up books from the month of August, I hinted that one of the books I read in August has potential to be my favorite book of the year. I think only one person guessed what it was, and that is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. I absolutely loved this book so much. It's definitely difficult. There are some really hard experiences that happen in here. This book is narrated by Aduni, who is a 14-year-old Nigerian girl living in Nigeria. At the beginning of the book, we know that her mom has passed away, and her father arranges a marriage for her to this much older man, and she's kind of forced to become the third wife of this man. She is quite naive about some things and doesn't really have a say in the matter. Her dream is to become a teacher and continue her education. She's a very smart young woman and really just wants to have a voice and encourage other women to have a voice. And that is kind of a theme throughout this book. I think the audiobook of this is spectacular. I wish I had looked up the narrator before filming this today. The narrator does such a great job, and it's written in Aduni's voice. So the English is somewhat broken in that English is not Aduni's first language. So as the book goes on and Aduni encounters more people and has more experience and more education, her English gets better. And that is the case in the writing of the book and in the narrator's voice. The narrator captures Aduni's emotions so well. I just love the voice of this young girl who manages to hold on to hope and kindness to people who are ultimately abusive to her. She manages to stand up for herself. Later on in the book, there's this one woman who is her employer / slave owner. She's basically a slave in this household. And the woman who runs the household is incredibly abusive and unkind and horrible to Aduni. Then at some point, something happens to this woman, and Aduni returns with kindness instead of revenge. She is not spiteful about the way she's been treated, but she treats this woman with kindness, which I just was blown away by that level of character that she has. I just love this book so much. It definitely was difficult to listen to and to hear her story, and definitely has some trigger warnings in there that I would look up if that's something that you need, but I thought it was fantastic, and it is up there as a contender for my favorite of the year. It was so good. So good. Another fantastic book that I read in the month of August. I'm not actually going to tell you my rating because this is one of my NetGalley 5-star predictions. This is a book that I had on NetGalley, but I also own the copy of it because somebody gifted it to me. Thank you so much, Amy. I believe this is from Amy. Yes, I was right. This one is a World War II historical fiction, and we follow Yona, who at a very young age was kidnapped and brought to live in the forest. She is raised in the forest by this older woman who teaches her how to survive in the forest, how to hunt and fish and tread lightly and create shelters and how to survive. That's all she knows is the forest. This woman isn't super kind to her though, and always kind of tells her that she has a purpose in life, but never really goes beyond that to let her know what that purpose is. And then at one point, I don't know how old Yona was, probably late teens, when this older woman passes away. She dies. And Yona is left on her own in the forest until one day she comes across a group of Jews who are hiding, who have run from the ghetto in their Polish town. This takes place in a Polish forest. Yona comes across this group of Jewish people and teaches them how to survive in the forest. There are some relationships that develop, and betrayal and joys and hardships, and it just was so interesting. I've discovered already that I really love middle grade survival stories, but I think I like adult survival stories too. I was just so intrigued by this whole idea of living in the forest. And it's based off of true events. Like there were truly groups of Jewish people who survived in the forests, hiding out there throughout the end of World War II. And I looked up pictures of the forest that is mentioned in this book and kind of got a better idea of what that looked like for them. It just was so interesting. And I really think Kristen Harmel is becoming a favorite author of mine. I really loved the Book of Lost Names, and now I also really loved The Forest of Vanishing Stars as well. Fabulous. I am going through my books in order of when I read them throughout the month. So my next book that I read was part of the Lunar read along that is for the Lunar Chronicles. So these are rereads for me. I read them about 5 years ago and absolutely loved them then. And Cinder did not disappoint. I loved it again. So go sci-fi. This is a sci-fi retelling of Cinderella where Cinder is a cyborg. She is part machine, part human. And in this world, she's just looked down upon as lesser than. I mean, we have like the evil stepmother and the stepsisters. She's actually really close friends with one of the stepsisters, but there is this pandemic of this disease that's going around, and her stepsister contracts this disease and is quarantined, and Cinder is trying to do what she can to save the life of her stepsister. In the process, she meets and befriends Kai, who is the prince of this part of the world. But his father has contracted this illness as well. And so Kai is the next in line to be the leader of this area. So this country, I guess country is the right word. There's also people who live on the moon, Lunars, and Queen Lavanna is evil. She is the queen of the lunar colonies. And Lunars have the ability to change their appearance and kind of make people feel certain things and feel certain ways. And Queen Lavanna is on a mission to take over the world, ultimately. And Kai plays a role in that, and Cinder gets messed up in it all. It's just so fast-paced and fun. It's a YA. I really enjoyed this so much, and I gave it 4 stars. Such a fun series. Not something I ever would have thought to pick up, but I did one day and I loved it. Flew through them all 5 years ago, and I'm loving it again this time around. So much fun. Then I did a buddy read with a couple friends of a Susan Meissner book, Stars Over Sunset Boulevard. I kind of had a goal this year to read all of my owned Susan Meissner books, and I'm not doing that great with that goal, but this one helps me get one more closer to finishing that goal. But this is really a book about friendship. We follow these 2 young women in Hollywood, and they both work as secretaries on the set of Gone with the Wind. There are secrets and betrayals along the way, but ultimately we follow these 2 women through the course of their life, their marriage, their marriages, their families. how these two interact and how the secrets that happened when they were younger play out in their future and affect their relationship, and how ultimately they choose to remain friends through all of it, even when that friendship is super rocky. There are things that drive wedges in that friendship, but they somehow still remain connected all the way through all of it. Susan Meissner just does a good job of spinning a yarn, like of telling a tale. I just think that I will read anything that she's written. It was really fun to see kind of behind the scenes of Gone with the Wind and things that were going on in the world. And on the movie set, we see different things, like they started shooting the movie before they even had a Scarlett O'Hara yet, which is crazy to me. And kind of the different order of how they shot some of the movie scenes. Yeah, it was interesting to catch a behind the scenes look. And also, I love a good friendship story. So there was that. So this one, I think I gave 4 stars too. Really enjoyed that one. Next, I picked up my patron pick. So some of my patrons have the ability to choose a book for me to read in the month, and I put all their choices in a cup. I swirl them around and I pick one out. And the book that I picked up for August was The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainani. And this is a middle grade fantasy. We have these 2 friends, Sophie and Agnes. Sophie is determined to get herself to the School of Good and Evil. They live in this village, and once every 4 years, the schoolmaster comes and takes away 2 children. Takes away 2 children to attend the School for Good or the School for Evil, or one or the other, or both. And Sophie is determined to be taken for the School for Good. She's a beautiful young girl, and she tries to do all of these things to prove that she should be in the School for Good. She befriends Agnes, who is shy and introverted and dark. Like, Sophie is blonde and light hair and light skin, and Agnes is kind of darker and lives in a graveyard and a little more gothic feel to her. And Sophie and Agnes, they actually become friends, but they both get taken. And instead of Sophie going to the School for Good and Agnes going to the School for Evil, it's actually switched. Agnes is taken to the School for Good and Sophie to the School for Evil. And we kind of see the interactions between these 2 schools. And it was humorous and quirky and just very descriptive. I enjoyed this. It is the first book in a trilogy. I am not chomping at the bit to get to the second book of it. I maybe will someday pick it up, but I did enjoy this first one. I thought it was a fun ride. So glad that I read that one. That needs to get returned to the library. The next book that I finished was another kind of out of my comfort zone. Sci-fi is just not the genre that I normally pick up, but I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I really enjoyed reading this book. Yes, the sciencey bits are a lot. However, I think Andy Weir does a good job of inner monologue. We follow this man, Ryland Grace, who at the beginning of the story, he wakes up on this spaceship in space, and he cannot remember how he got there and why he's there. He doesn't even remember his name, to be honest, at the beginning. Slowly, he begins to get his memories back. And so we kind of go along for that ride. So we're seeing him in space and some of the things that he just knows how to do instinctually, but also as he's kind of exploring and trying to figure things out and trying to spark his memory. And then we kind of get flashbacks of things as he's remembering what's going on. So I liked that. I thought I laughed out loud at times with his inner dialogue with himself. Sometimes a man on his own, in this similar vein to The Martian, I feel like it could get boring potentially. I was not bored by this at all. There were 2 chapters at some point in the middle that felt super heavy on the science, math, physics side of things. And I felt a lot of it goes over my head. And that is the case. But I was captivated by this man and his story and how he got there and what happens to him and how he figures things out. I just thought it was great. There were some jaw-dropping moments that I have seen other people spoil, and Gloria, I do think it's a spoiler because I was completely unaware. I feel like people had done a good job of talking about this book where I had no idea what was coming. And so it was a lot of fun for me to discover that as I was going. I get that it's not for everybody. And I totally can see why it wouldn't be for everybody, but I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It's not a new favorite of the year, but I did really enjoy it. So that's Project Hail Mary. My patron book club pick for the month of August was The Memory Keeper's Daughter by Kim Edwards. This is a book that has been on my shelves for a really long time. I'm so glad that my patrons picked it and that I finally read it and got it off my shelves. However, I didn't love this story. I think this is the book that helped me to discover that I don't particularly love family dramas. I think often in family dramas, it's people behaving badly, and that's why there's so much drama. And that's the case here. I didn't really like most of the characters. There were some people that I did like, but some of the main characters were really frustrating, and the choices that they made and the way that they communicated or didn't communicate, I found it to be just overall sad, like kind of heartbreaking, and I didn't feel like there was enough hope and light to counterbalance that heaviness. So right at the beginning of this book, Dr. Henry delivers his wife's baby. There's a blizzard. They're not able to get to their doctor, and he delivers his wife's baby. Turns out it's twins, and the second one is born, and he notices right away that she has Down syndrome. It's in the 1960s, and at that time, the typical response was to put these children into hospitals or like asylums. I'm sure there might have been some that were good homes, but he immediately said to the nurse, take her away and take her to this institution. The nurse does take the baby, goes to the institution, discovers that it's kind of a horrible place, and cannot, with good conscience, leave the baby there. And so she decides to keep the baby for herself and raise her. She's hoping at the beginning that the doctor will come clean to his wife and that they will change their minds about everything. Realizes relatively quickly the doctor told his wife that the baby died, that they did have another baby, but the baby died and didn't live outside of the womb at all. This decision of the doctor to get rid of the baby and tell the Nora, his wife, that the baby died has consequences that last for decades. So we follow Caroline the nurse and baby Phoebe as they go, as Phoebe grows, and I loved Caroline and Phoebe's side of things. David and Nora, David never came clean with his wife about what happened, and it ate him alive, and he was never the same because of it. And because of that wedge that got driven into their relationship because of this secret, Nora begins to act out, and she has affairs and doesn't remain faithful to him, and it affects Paul, their son, Phoebe's twin brother. It affects him and how he grows up and his relationship with both his mom and his dad. It just was heavy and dark and sad, and I gave it 3 stars. I'm glad that I read it. I was interested all the way through, but it did make me discover that family drama are just not my thing. They're not my favorite books to read. I will read them, but they're not my favorite for sure. Speaking of family drama, and I'm not going to tell you my rating for this because I read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, and this is the final book in my 5-star predictions that I did last November. Shame that it took me so long to read. But in this one, we follow twin sisters who live in this town where being a light-skinned Black person is valued, and like people did what they could to keep their skin as light as possible from generation to generation. Well, these 2 girls, as young teens, decide they need to get out of Dodge. They need to get out of town. And they do, and they go to New Orleans, and they live together until one day one of the sisters just up and disappears and goes and leaves her other sister behind. And so we kind of follow these 2 sisters and where their paths have taken them. One of them ends up marrying a very dark-skinned Black man and has a daughter who's also very dark-skinned and moves back home. And the other one, we learn, passes as white and marries a white man and never tells anybody in her current life the truth of who she is. So it's very interesting. I again don't love family drama, but I am glad that I read this. I feel like it's perspectives that I'm just not as familiar with, and I think that it was an interesting story. I did not ever feel like I was rooting for either of these 2 sisters. And that was frustrating to me. So for me, I don't think this lived up to the hype that I was hoping for, but I'm glad that I read it. With Amy Bowman, I read book 2 in the Keepers of the Lost Cities series. This is Exile by Shannon Messenger. Because it's book 2, I can't really tell you too much that happens, except that Sophie is still learning more and more about her abilities, and she's still fighting. I loved Sophie in this one, even more than I liked her in the first one. I feel like she's coming into her own a little bit more and standing up for what she believes is right. I love Grady and Edeline, the couple who kind of take her in, and their relationship and the struggles that they go through all together. I love that this touches on grief and how that affects people. I loved that there was a alicorn in here, which is kind of like a unicorn, a horse that can fly. I don't know, it was similar to a unicorn, sparkly poop and the whole 9 yards. Like, I just feel like this had a lot of really fun moments. It's a middle grade, very, very fast paced, but I like that we're getting a little deeper into some of the characters. Sophie is learning to accept herself more. She is a little different than the other people in her community, and I love the friends that she has made and the struggles that they have and the way that they all come together by the end. I just think that this is so much fun, and I'm very excited to continue with this series. And then Chantel from Chantel Add an Intentional Life. She and I did a little collab library haul, and we each picked a book for the other person to read. And she picked for me book 2 in the Mysterious Benedict Society. This is And the Perilous Journey by Trenton Lee Stewart. And this in this one, it's a mystery, middle grade mystery, and we follow the same 4 precocious and brilliant children that we follow in the first book, and they kind of go on another mystery. Mr. Benedict has kind of gone missing with one of his assistants, and these 4 kids take it upon themselves to go and find out where he is. Mr. Benedict has kind of left clues along the way, so there's a lot of solving riddles and figuring things out, and it's fun. A delightful series. I don't think it goes very deep and deal with a lot of like some of the issues in middle grade that maybe a book like this will deal with. I feel like this is a little bit more surfacey with the characters, but it is a lot of fun. It's quirky, and I have watched the first season on Disney Plus and really loved it. So I hope that they continue making more adaptations, because I just feel like it's a fun book to adapt. It has a lot of potential for another great adaptation. So I'm glad that I read that. Thank you, Chantel, for picking this one for me. And the final book that I popped in right at the end of the month is this little picture book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. This is like I said, picture book. There's not really a plot or a story very much. There are some beautiful kind of sketched illustrations. They're not very fleshed out. Some have colors, most don't. There's kind of like line drawings. But we follow this boy who at the very beginning meets a mole, and then a fox, and then a horse. And it has just these poignant little questions and thoughts to ponder. I feel like this is something I could kind of pop in and out of. What's your best discovery? Asked the mole. That I'm enough as I am, said the boy. I love that. Just like little moments of thoughtfulness, perspective. We have such a long way to go, sighed the boy. Yes, but look how far we've come, said the horse. Just, it's lovely. I don't know how else to describe it. When the dark clouds come, keep going. So it's like moments of motivation and encouragement and thoughtfulness. I just think it's lovely. That's the best word I can use. And it was a wonderful way to wrap up a fantastic reading month. I think I gave that one 4 stars as well. I am strong enough to lift these. It's going to happen. So here, I just don't know if I can get them all in screen. Yes, I can. Oh, and you're totally crooked. I hit my phone. Can I do this? So here are all of the books that I read in the month of August. Yeah! They're so heavy. All right, I need to set them down. I would love to hear... Oh. I know I have some different opinions on some of them than maybe some other people do, but I would love to hear your thoughts on these books or any of the books that you read in the month of August. I hope that you had a fantastic reading month. And that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I can't wait to talk to you down in the comments below. You guys know I love talking with you down there. And I can't wait to talk to you in another video also very soon. Bye.